Greatest destroyer of peace today is the cry of the innocent.
We were all told she was a living saint, a symbol of kindness, a Nobel Peace Prize winner who gave her life to the poor. But what if that's only half the story? What if behind the white sari and halo of sainthood was something far more sinister? Former volunteers have come forward with disturbing accounts. Journalists have raised red flags. So here's the question no one wants to ask. Was Mother Teresa a humanitarian or a cult leader? Stick around, because what you're about to hear might change the way you see her forever. How does an unknown Albanian nun become one of the most famous women in history? The answer lies in a carefully crafted transformation that would make modern PR experts jealous. In 1910, a girl named Agnes Gonksha Bojaksiu was born in Skopje, Macedonia. By age 12, she felt a deep connection to God. At 18, she joined the Sisters of Loreto and headed to India as a missionary. But this ordinary beginning would soon give way to something extraordinary. The real story starts in 1948, when Agnes made a bold move. She left her comfortable teaching position at a convent school and walked into the slums of Calcutta. She had received what she called a call within a call to serve the poorest of the poor. 2 years later, she founded the Missionaries of Charity and took the name Mother Teresa. Her mission was simple, yet powerful: care for those who were dying, rejected by hospitals, and forgotten by society. In the 1950s, Mother Teresa worked tirelessly among Calcutta's most desperate residents. She opened her first home for the dying in an abandoned Hindu temple. Here, she provided basic care to people who had nowhere else to go. She picked up the sick from the street, washed their wounds, and stayed with them as they died. Word of her work began to spread through local communities, but she remained largely unknown to the outside world. Everything changed in 1969 when British journalist Malcolm Muggeridge arrived in Calcutta with a BBC film crew. His documentary brought Mother Teresa's work to television screens across Europe and America. Muggeridge later wrote a book called Something Beautiful for God, which became a bestseller. Suddenly, this small Albanian nun was front-page news around the world. The timing was perfect. People in wealthy countries were looking for heroes, and Mother Teresa fit the role perfectly. The media attention triggered something remarkable. Donations began flooding in from every corner of the globe. Rich Catholics, celebrities, and ordinary people sent millions of dollars to support her work. People like Princess Diana of Wales, the Reagans, the Clintons, Yasser Arafat, and many more donated tons of money to her foundation and organizations. The Vatican took notice too. Church leaders saw an opportunity to showcase Catholic charity work at its finest. They promoted her story aggressively, turning her into a symbol of Christian love and sacrifice. But this fame machine required constant feeding. Mother Teresa's organization became experts at publicity. They arranged photo opportunities with world leaders, organized speaking tours, and shared stories designed to tug at heartstring. Every image showed her in her simple white sari, surrounded by the sick and poor. The message was clear. Here was a living saint who had given up everything for others. The strategy worked beyond anyone's wildest dream. By the 1970s, Mother Teresa had become untouchable. She won award after award, including the Nobel Peace Prize in 1979. Her organization expanded rapidly, opening missions in country after country. Over 4,000 sisters joined her order, along with hundreds of thousands of volunteers. They operated in 90 countries by the time of her death. Yet, even during these glory years, some observers began asking uncomfortable questions. A few journalists noticed that her facilities seemed basic despite the massive donations pouring in. Others wondered why patients appeared to receive minimal medical treatment. These early critics faced harsh backlash from her supporters, who saw any criticism as an attack on sainthood itself. The Missionaries of Charity grew into a global empire during the 1980s and 1990s. Each new mission followed the same pattern: simple buildings, basic care, and lots of publicity. Mother Teresa traveled constantly, meeting with presidents, popes, and movie stars. She appeared on magazine covers and gave speeches to packed audiences. Her message never changed. The poor deserved love, and suffering brought people closer to God. By the time Mother Teresa died in 1997, few people dared question her methods or motive. She had achieved something almost impossible in the modern world. Universal admiration. Politicians from all parties praised her. Religious leaders of different faiths honored her. Even non-believers respected her dedication. The Catholic Church fast-tracked her to sainthood, making her Saint Teresa of Calcutta in 2016. But some brave voices were about to challenge this carefully crafted image. Hidden behind decades of glowing press coverage were disturbing questions about medical care, financial transparency, and the true nature of her organization. Volunteers who worked inside these facilities witnessed conditions that shocked them. The stories they tell paint a picture very different from the saintly image the world came to know. These weren't rumors or gossip. These were first-hand accounts from people who traveled thousands of miles to help the poor, only to discover something deeply troubling. Hemley Gonzalez was one of those volunteers. He worked at a Missionaries of Charity hospice and saw things that disturbed him. The facilities had no trained doctors or nurses overseeing patient care. Instead, volunteers with zero medical experience were left to handle serious medical situations. Gonzalez watched as volunteers saw sisters rinsing needles under cold tap water, then reusing them on different patients. This wasn't proper sterilization. This was a dangerous practice that could spread deadly infections between patients who were already fighting for their lives. The hygiene problems went far beyond dirty needles. Gonzalez observed clothes covered in urine and feces being washed right next to eating utensils. Expired medications were given to patients regularly. Basic sanitation rules that every hospital follows were completely ignored. When volunteers asked about proper sterilization procedures, the nuns reportedly said, "There's no point." This response revealed an attitude that seemed to accept poor conditions as normal. Other volunteers came forward with similar stories. One witnessed a toe amputation performed without any pain medication. The facilities were described as looking like World War I hospitals, with patients lying on stretcher beds receiving almost no medical attention. One volunteer said the places had no chairs anywhere, and patients were simply dying. Christopher Hitchens spent years investigating these conditions and published his findings in The Missionary Position. He argued that Mother Teresa's facilities were poorly managed and failed to prioritize helping people feel better. Even though the organization received millions of dollars in donations, pain relief was rarely provided to suffering patients. Hitchens made a striking observation about Mother Teresa's philosophy. He said she was not a friend of the poor, she was a friend of poverty. She said that suffering was a gift from God. This quote reveals something important about the organization's approach. The emphasis wasn't on reducing pain or improving medical care. Instead, suffering itself seemed to be valued as something spiritually beneficial. This philosophy directly conflicted with modern medical ethic, which prioritized patient comfort and quality of life. Dr. Arup Chatterjee conducted extensive research for his book, Mother Teresa, The Untold Story. He interviewed many people who worked closely with the sisters. Chatterjee concluded that the organization promoted what he called a cult of suffering. His research suggested that glorifying pain and hardship was more important to the organization than actually treating it. This approach raised serious questions about whether the goal was really to help people or to use their suffering for other purposes. The contrast between the organization's massive wealth and the poor conditions became impossible to ignore. Millions of dollars poured in from donors around the world who believed their money would provide better medical care. Instead, patients received minimal treatment in facilities that lacked basic medical supplies and trained staff. The gap between public perception and reality was enormous. These medical controversies weren't isolated incidents. Multiple volunteers from different time periods reported similar problems. The pattern suggested systematic issues rather than occasional mistakes. The lack of proper medical protocols, the reuse of contaminated equipment, and the withholding of pain medication all pointed to an organizational culture that didn't prioritize patient welfare. The most disturbing aspect was how preventable these problems were. With the millions in donations the organization received, they could have hired trained medical staff, bought proper sterilization equipment, and provided pain medication. The choice not to do these things seemed deliberate rather than forced by poverty. But these medical failures only hint at deeper mysteries in her finances. The volunteers who spoke out faced criticism from Mother Teresa's supporters. Many people didn't want to hear negative things about someone they viewed as a saint, but these witnesses had no reason to lie. They had volunteered their time and money to help, only to discover conditions that troubled their consciences. Their accounts raised uncomfortable questions about where all that donated money was actually going. But these medical controversies were just the beginning of deeper financial mysteries that would soon come to light. Where did the millions of dollars donated to help the poor actually go? This question haunted investigators for decades as they tried to trace the massive flow of money into Mother Teresa's organization. The numbers simply didn't add up. Donors around the world sent enormous sums, believing their money would directly help sick and dying people in Calcutta. What they discovered instead was a financial black hole that swallowed donations and provided few answers about where the money went. The first major red flag came in 1991, when Stern, a German magazine, published a shocking report about the Missionaries of Charity's finances. Their investigation found that only 7% of donations actually reached the poor people the organization claimed to serve. 7%. That meant for every $100 donated by caring people around the world, only $7 actually helped the intended recipients. The remaining $93 disappeared into the organization's mysterious financial system, which seems to be going back to the Vatican. This report sent shockwaves through the charity world. How could an organization with such a saintly reputation manage money so poorly? The German investigators had spent months trying to track donations through the Missionaries of Charity's books. What they found was a complete lack of financial transparency that made it almost impossible to follow the money trail. The organization's financial dealings became even more suspicious when investigators discovered their close relationship with the Vatican Bank. This institution, officially called the Institute for the Works of Religion, had a dark reputation. The Vatican Bank had been linked to money laundering scandals, connections with organized crime, and other illegal activities for decades. The fact that Mother Teresa's organization moved large amounts of money through this troubled bank raised serious questions about financial oversight and accountability. But the most damaging financial scandal involved a convicted criminal named Charles Keating. Keating was convicted of stealing $252 million from nearly 17,000 senior citizens through a savings and loan scheme that destroyed thousands of lives. These weren't wealthy people who could afford to lose money. These were retirees who lost their life savings to Keating's fraud. Despite knowing about his crimes, Mother Teresa accepted a massive donation of $1.25 million from Keating. The story gets worse. When Keating faced trial for his crimes, Mother Teresa wrote a letter to the judge, asking for mercy. In her letter she said, "I only know that he has always been kind and generous to God's poor and always ready to help whenever there was a need." She was defending a man who had stolen from the very type of vulnerable people her organization claimed to protect. The irony was stunning and deeply disturbing. Even more troubling was what happened after Keating's conviction. Prosecutors asked Mother Teresa to return the stolen money so it could go back to the victims Keating had robbed. She never responded to their request. She kept the $1.25 million even though she knew it came from elderly people who had been cheated out of their retirement funds. This decision revealed something dark about the organization's priorities and moral compass. The pattern of accepting money from questionable sources wasn't limited to the Keating case. Mother Teresa regularly accepted donations from dictators, wealthy criminals, and other controversial figures without asking questions about where the money came from. She seemed more interested in the size of the donation than the character of the donor. Meanwhile, the contrast between the organization's wealth and the conditions in their facilities became impossible to ignore. Millions of dollars poured in from around the world, yet patients still lay on basic cots without proper medical care. The facilities lacked modern equipment, trained medical staff, and even basic pain medication. If the money wasn't going to improve patient care, where was it going? The Missionaries of Charity consistently refused to publish detailed financial records. In houses around the world, financial information was kept secret from volunteers, donors, and even government officials. This lack of transparency made it impossible for anyone to verify how donations were actually being used. Most legitimate charities publish annual reports showing exactly how they spend donated money. Mother Teresa's organization operated in complete financial secrecy. Financial investigators suggested the money served purposes far beyond helping the poor. The organization appeared to function more like a fundraising machine for the Catholic Church than a transparent charity focused on reducing human suffering. The modest facilities and basic care provided to patients seemed designed to maintain the image of poverty and sacrifice, while enormous sums flowed through hidden channels. But the controversies extended beyond money into even darker territories that would challenge everything the world believed about this supposed saint. How many cult characteristics did the missionaries of charity actually display? To answer this question, we need to examine Mother Teresa's organization through the same lens experts use to identify dangerous religious groups. The patterns that emerge are deeply troubling and remarkably similar to tactics used by confirmed cult leaders throughout history. At the center of every cult stands a charismatic leader whose word becomes law. Mother Teresa fit this role perfectly within her organization. Her authority was absolute and unquestioned. Former members described a rigid hierarchy where questioning Mother Teresa's decisions was simply not allowed. Her vision became the only vision that mattered. This type of leadership structure creates an environment where abuse can flourish because no one has the power to challenge the leader's actions or decisions. The control over members' daily lives went far beyond normal religious expectations. Nuns within the missionaries of charity faced restrictions that isolated them from the outside world completely. They were not allowed to go out alone, watch television, or read newspapers. Even more shocking, they were not even allowed to meet their own families. According to Mary Johnson's testimony, nuns received only one letter from home per month and were granted just 2 weeks of home leave once every 10 years. Colette Livermore, a former nun in the Missionaries of Charity, recalled being denied permission to visit her brother in the hospital, even though he was thought to be dying. "I wanted to go home, but you see, I had no money and my hair was completely shaved. Not that that would have stopped me. I didn't have any regular clothes," she said. "It's just strange how completely cut off you are from your family." Speaking of her experience, she described it using the term brainwashing. This level of isolation is a classic cult tactic designed to make members completely dependent on the organization. When people can't access outside information or maintain relationships beyond the group, they lose the ability to think critically about what's happening to them. But perhaps one of the most disturbing allegations involve what happened to patients in Mother Teresa's facilities during their final moments. Former workers reported that dying patients were secretly baptized without their knowledge or consent, often done without patient consent while they were unconscious. According to Dr. Perg's interviews, one nun explained their practice by saying they gave everyone a ticket to St. Peter's, because without the ticket to St. Peter's, they won't let them go in. This practice represents a serious violation of religious freedom and personal choice. Taking advantage of vulnerable, dying people to force religious conversion on them shows a complete disregard for human dignity and basic ethical standards. The organization's philosophy about suffering also matches dangerous cult thinking. Mother Teresa promoted the idea that pain and hardship were gifts from God that brought people closer to heaven. She was quoted as comparing suffering patients with Jesus on the cross. This belief system served the organization's purposes perfectly because it justified providing minimal medical care while still claiming to help people. When suffering becomes something holy instead of something to prevent, it becomes much easier to ignore people's pain and basic needs. These practices mirror established patterns that cult experts have identified across different dangerous groups: isolation from family and outside information, absolute authority of a single leader, exploitation of vulnerable people, and religious justification for harmful practices are all warning signs that appear repeatedly in cult organizations. The similarities between the missionaries of charity and these patterns are striking and cannot be ignored. The allegations against the organization became even darker in recent years. Indian authorities arrested members of the Missionaries of Charity for crimes against children, which included stealing and selling babies. Sister Consilia and social worker Anima Indir admitted to selling 4 babies, including a 6-month-old boy, for as little as 40,000 rupees, leading to arrests and government probes in Ranchi. These criminal charges represent the most serious accusations the organization has ever faced. If true, they show how the same control tactics used on adult members could be turned toward exploiting the most vulnerable victims of all. The pattern of abuse extended beyond individual incidents. Multiple facilities across different countries showed similar problems with medical care, financial transparency, and treatment of both patients and workers. This suggests the issues were built into the organization's structure rather than being isolated problems that could be easily fixed. Experts remain divided on whether to officially classify the Missionaries of Charity as a cult. Some argue that the religious nature of the organization and its charitable mission distinguish it from traditional cults. Others point to the overwhelming evidence of control tactics, exploitation, and abuse as clear signs of cult behavior. The debate continues among researchers who study dangerous religious groups. What cannot be debated is that the organization displayed multiple characteristics that experts use to identify cults: the charismatic leadership, isolation tactics, exploitation of vulnerable people, and recent criminal allegations create a pattern that demands serious examination. The evidence presents a complex picture that defies simple answers about one of history's most famous religious figures. Mother Teresa did many good things, but people are rarely one-dimensional. It's possible to do lots of good and still have evil tendencies, because that is what it means to be human. You've seen the facts, you've heard the testimonies. Now it's your turn to decide. Was Mother Teresa a humanitarian or a cult leader? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you have enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel for more chilling stories like this. Always remember, beware the leader and never drink the Kool-Aid.